or Jennifer Arganaraz title, for those of you who don't know me. We are a title company. Um, we have 13 locations all over Florida, so we're pretty much everywhere. All the files from this office gets processed from our Miramar location, which I was talking to them right now about. So I'm just throwing it out there so you guys are aware. But you can close in any of the locations that we have throughout Florida. So if you have a closing in Kendall, your files being processed in Miramar, you can close in Kendall. So I just want to keep that in mind. Rentals are pretty much every branch. And the funding, when it comes to purchases, will come out of the Miramar office. And we can either wire you commissions or FedEx everything here to Home 61. Just wanted to throw that out there since I had a discussion right now in regards to that. So today we're going to talk about the closing process, which is actually one of my favorite subjects because it's closing. So closings are always the best because everybody gets paid right at the end of the transaction. But at the same time, the closing is where everybody gets a little stressed out and nervous. So we're going to go through what entails with the closing process, and I'm going to give you tips of what you can do to keep everybody calm, because at the end of the day, closing time should be happy time, because that's where you get the referrals. If you guys have any questions, just jump in. Okay, well, I'm Jennifer, as you can see. Okay, we're going to cover in this training, we're going to cover setting expectations, which I think is the most important thing when it comes to dealing with buyers and sellers, because they're not aware of what really goes on during the process of purchasing a home. We're going to speak about critical dates. There are critical dates on the contract that you have to go over with your client because it's like a ticking time bomb, basically. Who's responsible for what? Escrow and fees, the actual closing process, the funding process, and then we're going to go over things that you should remember. Okay? Okay, what is it that a title company actually does? Okay, we are the one who facilitates the closing, and we're a title insurance company, therefore we insure title. Okay, we make sure title's clean, usage is clean, so when we turn over the property from one owner to the other, they get a clean property, like clean title, how when you purchase a car, they say, oh, clean title. Basically, that's what you're getting. And then the title insurance is then given to the buyer and either insured through the whole time that they own the property. Okay? Anybody have any questions on what a title company does? We're all familiar? Okay, cool. Okay, setting expectations. This is, I think, the most important part of you dealing with your client. And I'm going to tell you why, because I see it on a daily basis. I work with many realtors, way more than you guys are ever going to work with. Just so you can have an idea, we close about 400 transactions a month. I myself close about 40 a month. Therefore, I'm dealing with buyer agents and listing agents. 40 times 2, like 80 realtors in a month I have to deal with. So imagine the wonderful things they see you guys do. How you guys get stressed out and have panic attacks. I've even seen realtors cry. So we're going to avoid all that. My tip is don't take anything personal. It's business. People are going to lash out at you. People are going to be stressed out. So you guys got to put yourself in the position of your client. Remember, this is a purchase that they're doing. It's not a pair of shoes. You can't go to Macy's and return them with a receipt. Okay? This is something, it's like one of the biggest purchases that they're having, so it is a little stressful on them. And keep in mind that they have no idea what goes on in a real estate transaction. They buy a house practically maybe 5 to 7 years, every 5 to 7 years. So they're not going to remember what happens through a transaction. So as a realtor and as a professional, it is your duty, your obligation to kind of like hold their hand and kind of walk them through them. And by you setting expectations, it's actually a selfish act because it's going to help you kind of help them get them off your back, because they're going to blow up your phone for every little thing and they don't know. So setting expectations, I think, is the most important part of dealing with buyers. Oh, and sellers, actually. These are things you need to discuss with your buyers. Everything doesn't fall on top of the realtor, okay? Or the title company or the lender. The actual buyer has responsibilities too, okay? So it's very important that when you do get into a contract or an offer with them, you go over the critical dates, okay? You go over the terms of the contract, who's responsible for what, Everything doesn't land on you guys. They have to make sure that they get inspections done, they apply for the loan with the lender, escrow deposits, turning in documents, go over closing fees with them, and the closing and the funding process. I personally don't think you should go over the closing and the funding process in the beginning, because by the time you sign a contract to the end, they're not gonna remember anything. Plus it's like too much, like TMI. So I would go over like baby steps. You know, you go over the critical dates, the escrows, what they need to do, you know, with the timeline of the contract. And then later when you get closer to closing, then you go over the closing and the funding process, so they don't show up at closing with a U-Haul truck on a Friday at 4 o'clock at the end of the month. This has actually happened, by the way. Okay, the important critical dates that they should remember: escrow deposits. Escrow deposits, according to the contract, I believe it's 3 to 5 days. If you leave it blank, I think it's 3, or whatever it is that you guys put in there. Sometimes there's not 1 deposit, sometimes it's 2 deposits. They have to know that they have to turn in those deposits according to the contract timeline. If not, they're out of contract. This is something that they need to understand. I've had people, oh no, because the buyer is gonna give you a check, you know, when he comes back from, I don't know, the weekend getaway, whatever. No, he needs to have it by this date. If not, you're out of contract, and if they can't have it by that day, you need to extend that escrow deposit period. Because yes, they'll tell you, you'll call the realtor and they'll be like, yeah, don't worry about it, it's gonna be a day late, no big deal. Get it in writing. It's not a big deal now, but maybe later on, if something goes wrong, it will be a big deal, and oh, you were out of contract. Okay? Keep in mind, escrow deposits can be personal checks, cashier's checks, and money orders. When it comes to money orders, if they're doing financing, I would check with whoever's doing the financing, because sometimes money orders are not sourceable, so they're gonna have to disregard the escrow deposit. So if they are getting financing and they're gonna do money orders, check with the lender first. Okay? No cash. Escrow deposits, no cash. Okay? The loan application. They have to actually apply for the loan within the 5 days according to the contract. Okay? So make sure that you get a hold of that lender, make sure that your buyer is meeting with that lender to sign all the disclosures, because if they don't sign all the disclosures, the lender can't begin their process. And the clock is ticking. You don't want them to wait a whole week, because believe it or not, a week in the finance world is a really long time. So a whole week, for them to lose a whole week, it's gonna affect their closing date. Inspections, they need to make sure they do their due diligence. If they don't have an inspector, you can refer one to them. If they don't wanna do the inspections, I personally would get it in writing, because later on, if something happens, then everybody wants to blame somebody, and usually they blame the realtor. And we work on referral, so the last thing you want to do is not get a referral from the client because supposedly you didn't tell them to get an inspection. Okay, the loan approval due date. This is so important. I've seen people lose deposits over this. According to the contract, and you need to make sure that this is the responsibility also of your buyer, but technically the realtor should be in touch with the lender with this here. You have 30 days according to the contract to get a loan approval to the listing agent. If you do not have a loan approval to give to them and the listing agent doesn't say anything to you, it doesn't mean that they're being nice, okay? It just means you're basically waiving your loan approval period. And what does that mean? That if it doesn't close, you can get all the denial letters that you want, your buyer's automatically gonna lose your deposit. And I've seen this happen already so many times that there's nothing you can do about it. It's an automatic, you lose your deposit. You can go to mitigation and all that stuff, but you lose your deposit, unless you have a valid reason as to why you didn't get a loan approval, which is maybe, oh, he was approved, but you can't close because maybe something of the HOA, then that's not on the buyer. Okay? But you need to make sure that you do not depend on your lender to call you on day 29 and be like, oh, by the way, I don't have a loan approval yet. No, you need to stay on top of the lender. Put a reminder on your phone, in your calendar, an alarm, that on day 25 for this specific transaction, you're going to be calling the lender to find out what's going on and where's your loan approval. If you extend the closing date, that does not mean you're extending the loan approval period. Realtors make this mistake so many times. Oh, but I extended the closing date. That's extending everything on the contract. You have to be specific. It's a legal binding contract. If you gotta go to court, you gotta be specific. I don't have a loan approval, I'm extending the closing date for another 15 days, and I need to extend the loan approval period for like another 10, let's say. But make sure if you're extending the closing date and you don't have a loan approval, that you extend the loan approval period. If they give you an approval and then they give you a denial, you will lose your deposit, which happened to a realtor on Monday. She's like, oh, we gave the approval, but now we're getting a denial letter. I'm like, yeah, but you're like on day 60. Oh, but I extended the closing date. I go, yeah, but you didn't extend anything else. So now, I had to call a listing agent, and it was like a Miami-Dade, whatever program, so we had to wait on Miami-Dade, and it's not really the buyer's fault. It was Miami-Dade, and honestly, the lender dropped the ball. But now they're not extending the contract, but they're not going after the deposit, hoping that they can fix whatever's done, and if they're not under contract by the time that's done, then they're gonna extend the contract. So luckily, we have a nice listing agent that's willing to work with the buyer, so the buyer doesn't have to lose their $5,000 deposit. But these are little things that can happen to you, so I stress this to realtors all the time because I see this happening so much, and they get confused. If you decide to waive the loan approval period, also the seller, if they want, they can accept to get out of the contract and accept a higher offer if they have a backup offer. In that case, if they don't want to extend the loan approval period and they want to take the higher offer, then the buyer automatically gets back their deposit. Okay, does anybody have any questions on that part? Because it's like a really important part, huh?
Say that last part again.
If you wanna waive the loan approval period, because you're like, okay, my buyer's gonna close, they're just waiting for the green card to come in, let's say. But he's gonna close, it's just they're renewing their green card. And I'm using this example because obviously it happens.
Can you get a little closer to the mic? Online viewers have it.
Oh, okay. So obviously if I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
We're talking about the deposit.
Okay, so if let's say you're waiting for the loan approval, but you decide to waive the loan approval period because he's waiting for a green card, which is not a big deal. He's gonna get approved, but your lender can't give you a written approval because the underwriter won't give it to them because of the green card. But it's on the way, it's in the mail, whatever happened to me one time, that's why I'm saying the story. You can choose to waive the loan approval period. When you choose to waive the loan approval period, the seller can either accept, okay, we can continue, or they can say, you know what, I have a higher offer, backup offer, and it's cash deal, I'm gonna take that offer. And they can legally get out of the contract, and the buyer will automatically get back the deposit. But it's a way, if the seller wants to get out of the contract, they can get out and they're not in default. So that's why they did that.
But they return the deposit.
But yeah, they do return the deposit.
But they return.
But you have to be within those 30 days.
Right.
You can't be like day 35. Hey, by the way.
But if the buyer cancels during the inspection period, which allows a buyer to get out for any reason, if the buyer...
Well, that's way before the loan approval
No,
period.
I understand that.
Oh, okay.
But my question is, if the buyer elects to do that, to cancel during the inspection period, and obviously they're entitled to have their deposit back, but does New World Tile require signatures from the seller as well?
Yes, any title company requires that.
Okay.
Whenever you're canceling a contract, any type of contract, any title company is gonna need a cancellation and because we need to know, okay, we're dispersing funds back to the buyer. Both parties have to be in agreement. Because I can't just take your word for it. Hey, my buyer, they're gonna cancel, so it's okay with it, give him back his deposit.
Well, I'm saying because you guys have a copy of the contract, so if the contract,
Yeah, but we have a copy of the contract, but the contract doesn't tell us anything but what the contract says. It doesn't tell us that they're canceling because of an inspection.
no, but we would have it, but when we cancel, we send a cancellation.
Right, well, the cancellation is where it tells you how to disperse. So yes, we do need a cancellation, it has to be signed by both parties. And pretty much any title company needs that. Okay. HOA approvals and applications. You cannot close without an HOA approval. I don't care if God comes down and tells me to close it, we ain't gonna close it. No title company is gonna close it, okay? And whoever is going to be on the deed needs to be on the HOA approval So if there's 3 people that are gonna be on the deed, let's say it's a mother and a father, and then they used the daughter as how like people like to call them co-signers or non-occupant co-borrower, even though she's on the loan, and let's say she's not gonna live on the property, but she's just there to help them with financing, she still has to apply to the HOA, and she still has to be on the approval, because the HOA approval has to match the warranty deed. So make sure if you have 5 people under contract as a buyer, all 5 apply for the HOA approval, because you cannot close without it. People have showed up to closing with 2 people on the approval, and they forgot the 3rd one, because they didn't think they had to be on there, and there's no closing. Okay? And make sure they do it in a timely manner, because also on the contract, the clock is ticking on that as well. Okay? And some HOA approvals take a long time. I know some that take about 3 weeks, some can take about a week, it depends. So make sure you get the HOA information from the listing agent and you call to find out what is the timeline that they take and how long they're taking.
So we have to do that? You guys don't do that?
No, we don't handle HOA approvals. We handle estoppels, which is we send out a questionnaire to the HOA asking them if they're what the it has a bunch of, if they're assessments, special assessments, if they're behind, if they're up to date, what the actual HOA is, all that is on the estoppel. Condo questionnaires that are needed by lenders and HOA approvals, that's all on the buyer or the realtor. Okay? And then go over the closing disclosure timeline. If you are doing financing, as you know, the lender has to release a CD, and they have to actually wait 3 days before they can close. So I'm going to touch a little bit more on this as we get ahead, because this is like one of the most important things that you need to be talking to your buyers about, because that's where they kind of freak out. Okay, escrow deposits and fees. Like I said, make sure they turn in all the escrow deposits on time according to the contract. Escrow letters can be, just so you know, escrow letters can be issued within 10 days. As long as you have proof that the escrow was given. And I'm gonna touch on this because realtors stress out a lot about this, and I don't know why. They like drop off an escrow check, and if they don't have an escrow letter like in 5 minutes, they're having like, oh my God, the world is ending, you know. No. Technically, we're supposed to wait for checks to clear in our account for us to give escrow letters, technically. We don't do that. We issue escrow letters right away. We just do it with subject to clear. Then later on, we probably have to redo another escrow letter saying that funds have cleared. But just know, if listing agents start pressuring you, oh, because I need the escrow letter, because this is what happens, we're all human. People start to pressure you, you start to feel the pressure, and most of you crack. Oh my God, I'm going to get a contract. No, we don't have to do that, guys. As long as you have proof, listen, they drop to the escrow. Usually we send, if whatever escrows come in, escrow letters go out the same day. It might not be in 5 minutes that you drop off the escrow check, but it will be before the day ends. If they're doing a wire, it's best always to get the wire confirmation because it's easier to track. Because guess what? Sometimes buyers don't do wires from their account. They'll do it from the husband's account. And then we have a wire lingering from Juan Perez, and we don't know who that person is, and we got $5,000 lingering in our account, and we don't know what file it belongs to, because they don't put an address, they don't put anything, they just don't know. So if you can get the confirmation, it's easier so we can track it, who sent it, and then we can kind of look for it, and it makes it a little easier for us to track the wire and issue the escrow letter, okay? Wires, sometimes when they come in, just so you know, we'll see the amounts, but sometimes it doesn't show the name until like a few hours later. So that's why with the confirmation and the reference number, we can kind of track it faster. So sometimes, sometimes that's why we get a wire today and the escrow letter won't go out until tomorrow. Because also, depending on what time they send the wire, it might not hit our account the same day, it might hit it the next day. But as long as they initiated the wire on the day that they were supposed to, and you have the wire confirmation proving so, you are not out of contract. Okay? So, and keep in mind, if the due date of anything on the contract lands on a weekend or a holiday, the due date would be the following business day, 5 p.m. Okay, so let's say it was Memorial Weekend that just passed, and your escrow due date was on Monday. Memorial Weekend, I technically have until Tuesday, 5 o'clock. The contract, just so everybody knows, when it comes to fees, the contract is gonna govern all the fees. So those little boxes that you guys check out, they tell us who pays what. So the seller, the buyer doesn't always pay the title search, and the buyer doesn't always pay the lien search. Sometimes the seller does, depending on which box gets marked. I believe if you mark Miami-Dade provision, the seller will pay title and lien. And if you mark like buyer, I believe they pay either one or the other. I don't know, I have to see the contract. But just keep that in mind. So basically, if you're representing a buyer, it's always better to do Miami-Dade because you're going to save them some money there. And if you're doing a seller, it's better for them to have buyer. Okay? The loan estimate always comes from the lender. I can give you an estimate, and I'd be more than happy to give you an estimate with fees, but just keep in mind it's only going to have my fees. That pre-CD that I gave you as an estimate has to go to the lender, and the lender can then do a loan estimate that pretty much gives them all the fees and what they're going to need for closing. Sometimes lenders do it without getting our fees, so they kind of over-disclose, but whatever they need as cash to close has to be verified by the lender. And trust me, if the lender's telling them they need $10,000, they're verifying that they have $10,000, so they have the money to close. If not, they wouldn't get a pre-qualification. And then, okay, lenders. Okay, so this is basically the closing process and how it happens. The lender will get the clear to close, okay? Then they send out the CD and the 3-day trade rule begins. They have to wait 3 days. Then closing instructions are released. Now, in a perfect world, we would have closing instructions on this day. But since we do not live in a perfect world, we usually don't get closing instructions until the day before closing, or my favorite, the day of closing. Those are always the funnest. Everybody's super stressed out at that point because nobody has the cash to close, and I just got closing instructions at 10 a.m. The best is when it happens end of the month. Those are fun times. I can't wait for you guys to go through that. Once we get the CD, we then have to prepare it. We got to send it to the lender, and then we kind of play ping pong with them. You know, oh, make these changes, make that changes, because our CD and the lender CD has to mirror, and we have to balance. And this process doesn't take an hour, because sometimes we'll prepare it, we'll send it. The lender's not just there waiting for me to send closing the CD. They might be like doing another CD. So by the time they get to it, it might be 2 hours later. Oh, guess what? We need changes. Send it back to us. Then of course my closer is in a closing, or she's doing something on another CD. She reviews it 2 hours later. So this can take hours. Okay. Obviously, if they know it has to close that day, and I'm getting closing instructions at 10 a.m., prepare yourself for a very late closing, because it doesn't usually happen that quickly. Once the final CD is approved, then we can go ahead and release the final numbers, okay? It's very important when we send the CD that the realtors look at it and actually check it. And what I mean by checking it, I mean check your commissions to make sure they are correct, and make sure that if there is a transaction fee from the broker, that you make sure it's on there. Title companies are always going to assume the commission is 6%, 3 and 3. It's like a default on the program. Sometimes it's, as you know, sometimes it's not 3 and 3. So make sure you check that, because it happens all the time. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 2 and 1, sometimes it's 2 and 2, whatever it is. So make sure you check, because that's your money, that's your commission. You don't know how many times I've seen closings close at 3 and 3, and then like 2 weeks later, oh my God, it was supposed to be 5. Oh my God, it already closed. Then there they have to, within the realtors, have to kind of like figure it out. Okay, so check your commissions, people. Then once the CD is confirmed and you guys say, okay, everything's good to go, then we can go ahead and confirm the closing and where we're going to close. Usually they're asking you what office you guys want to close, morning or afternoon, so we can more or less tentatively schedule it with that office. But again, keep in mind, if you get closing instructions the day of closing or the day before, morning closings are obviously not an option. We don't like to actually confirm an actual time until the CD is approved, because once the CD is approved, then we know we're getting a package. What I don't like is, I'm a stickler for time. Like I'm major, like time management. My time to me is super precious. So I don't like to go somewhere and sit there for 2 hours waiting, which is why I hate going to the doctor. So we like to respect people's time. So I'm sure you guys have stuff to do. Imagine staying a whole afternoon in my lobby. You know what I mean? I mean, we're fun people and everything, but during the end of the month and it's really busy, trust me, you don't want to be there for like 3-4 hours. Anybody will get pissed off waiting for 3 or 4 hours. So that's what we try to avoid. So that's why we're not going to tell you, hey, be here at 9:30 if I don't have a approved CD or a package. There's like a method to the madness. You know, we like for you guys to get there and boom, closing, in and out. Okay, nobody gets mad. Closing time, happy time. Okay, now let me go back. Let me go back for a minute. Okay, before you get to this part here, okay, like a week before you're about to close, you need to have a conversation with your buyer. And the conversation should go something like this. I swear I'm going to record this because I say this all the time, and I'm telling you that it works. If you prepare your client mentally, they're not going to drive you crazy. Because again, going back to the beginning, what I was explaining to you guys is, remember that they purchase something every 5 to 7 years. So when they're getting closer to closing, they're nervous. They're freaking out. Oh my God. I mean, we got to put ourselves also sometimes in the position that they're in, okay? We live in this wonderful world of real estate, and we do this on a daily basis, but most people don't. I have friends that they think they can get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Westchester for $1,200. Like, please, that doesn't exist. They don't know these things. We live in this world. They don't. So it is our job to kind of like, you're not only a realtor, but you're kind of like a psychologist, okay? So you're going to tell them, listen, because what happens is, sometimes what lenders do, they might not have the clear to close, but they're already sending out the CD. Why? Because they know they got to close on Friday. So if they know they got to close on Friday and their file's in underwriting, just waiting for the underwriter to sign off, they don't want to waste time, so they send out the CD on that day, so then the clock starts ticking, even though they don't have the clear close. But what happens is nobody knows they did this. So guess who gets the frantic call? Oh my God, I got a CD. This is my cash to close. No, you guys. Remember, the relationship with the buyer is really with you. You've been with them for months usually. Title company gets it when we get contract, and they don't really know us. So whenever they need anything, who do you think they call? The realtor. So you need to let them know, listen, right a few days before closing, you're going to get a closing disclosure from the lender. I don't know when it's going to go out. They're not even going to tell me, but they're going to send it to you. Keep in mind, those are not the final figures. That's not the cash to close. Because what happens is, since they don't have the clear to close, they kind of over-disclose a little bit. But they don't over-disclose more than the loan estimate because they can't. But remember, those are not the actual fees, because they still got to contact us because there's stuff that's being prorated, you know, maybe there's stuff that we have to collect, stuff like that. So those are not the final figures. So sometimes they want to get excited, they want to run to the bank, do the wire. No. Those are not the final figures. You need to let them know this ahead of time. Just call me when you get it. And then you got to let them know you're not going to get the cash to close until the day of closing or the day before. And that's reality. It would be nice to get it like on this day, but that's not reality. What really happens is you're not going to get it until the day of closing or the day before. There are some instances that we do have it a few days before, but again, it doesn't happen very often. They're going to get, because this is what happens. They get the CD and they know the closing's coming. So guess who they're calling 3 and 4 times a day, every day until closing? You guys. They're going to drive you crazy. And then what happens is you guys feel the pressure and then you guys call us. Oh my God, what do you mean you don't have the cash to close yet? We don't have it. Trust me, the minute we have the cash to close, we're going to give it to you. Nobody's holding cash to close hostage. It's not like I'm saying, you know what, let's have some fun with Home 61. Let's not give them the cash to close and stress them out on purpose. You know, we don't do that. We want to close. That's our objective. So trust me, we want to give you the cash to close. But if we don't have it, I can't give it to you. I get calls all the time. Oh my God, I still don't have the cash to close. The closing is on Friday. I'm like, I know, I don't have the cash to close either. I don't even have instructions. What's today, Wednesday? If it's Wednesday, I have 2 closings on Friday right now that I know of. I have no closing instructions at all. I was just talking to one of the realtors, hey, is this closing on Friday or what? Have you talked to the lender? I got nothing. So imagine. So that's why if you tell them and you prepare them mentally, you might actually save yourself a few phone calls. Don't get me wrong, you're gonna tell them and they're still gonna call. But then instead of calling you 3 times a day, they might just call you once. Hey, anything? Hey, anything? You know what I mean? No, nothing yet. And I do this because I see realtors stress out. I see realtors going crazy. What do you mean you don't have the cash to close? And they want to crucify us. But again, it's out of my control. We have to wait for the closing instructions, and I have to wait for them to approve the final CD. Until I have an approved final CD, I can't release cash to close. So this is something that you need to explain to your buyer so they don't call you and drive you crazy at the same time.
Have you ever seen a situation where the final CD was not approved, and then why did that happen?
No, the CD always has to be approved.
But is there ever a time when the underwriter's like, actually, no, this doesn't work, and we have to change it? Okay.
No.
It just takes time for them to process.
Yeah, because remember what happens is it goes from pre to close underwriting, and then it goes into a closing department. And then the closer has to prepare everything. But that's not the only file she's working on. There's many files. And then they don't, if it's Wednesday and if it's a closing for Friday, and she's got 5 that are closing today or tomorrow, what is she gonna work on? She's gonna work on tomorrow's closings, not Friday's. You know what I mean? So they kind of work in priorities. The same thing happens on our end. If they send me closing instructions for Friday and then they send me closing instructions for tomorrow, which one are we gonna work on first? The one of tomorrow, not the one of Friday. So everything is a process. You guys kind of have to kind of mentally picture it so you see how it works, because a lot of realtors get mad. Like, you don't know how many times, I can't believe this. This never happens. How come it's 3 days before closing, I don't have closing instructions? I'm like, first of all, this happens every day. So don't tell me it doesn't happen, because we close a lot of files, and I'm telling you that it happens every day. End of the month is horrible. No, every day. End of the month is hell. Okay? I can't even tell you what I went through in May. I cried like 3 times, okay, that week. Okay? Because I'm telling you, it gets stressful. It's okay, we're human. And not that I never cry, because I've been in this business for so many years that I literally wake up and I just shower with Vaseline, so everything just slips and slides off of me, and I don't take anything personal. But it happens. People think, oh, this is not normal. No, this is perfectly normal. You don't know how many, no, at the end of the month in May, I had lenders, files that weren't even supposed to close until the following week, they were shoving them in May. So like the last day of the month on Friday, 3 closing instructions to close today at 10 a.m. We're like, oh. And what are we gonna do, not close them? Of course not, we close them. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind when you're dealing. I'm telling you, if you remember anything from this training, anything at all, remember the speech. Hey, before closing, right before closing, hey buyer, guess what? You're gonna get a pre-CD from the lender right before closing, but don't go by those fees. Those are, just let me know when you get them, because believe it or not, once they send the CD, the actual closing date is on there. So I've had realtors call me, hey, are we really closing on Friday? Did they send the CD with Friday's date? Yeah, then that's when we're closing, but we don't have closing instructions. Yeah, I know. Don't worry, but we're still closing on Friday. If they're releasing the CD with Friday's date as a closing date, you are closing on Friday. We might not have closing instructions until Friday, but you're still gonna close on Friday. Okay? So just tell them, listen, you're gonna get a pre-CD. When you get it, just let me know. Because in that way, you guys can be like, hey, they sent us pre-CD, we're closing on Friday for sure. Because I'm telling you, sometimes they send the CD and they don't tell us. Hey, by the way, you're closing on Friday, until closing instructions appear 3 days later. Oh, by the way, you have closing on Friday. You know what I mean? So obviously some lenders are different than others. They're not all cookie cutters, and we work with a lot of lenders, so some of them kind of are used to, so they kind of give us heads up. But just keep in mind, you give them the speech. You're gonna get a CD before closing. Those are not the final numbers. The final cash to close always comes from the title company. Okay? And then when we send you the cash to close, and that's when we give you the wire instructions and we confirm everything. You let them know that's not gonna happen to the day of closing, the day before, and it buys you some sanity for a few days. Everybody got that? All right. Another conversation you should be having with them is the funding, okay? Just, buyers think that just because they sign all the paperwork right then and there, that's it, they're closed. Give me the keys. I got the U-Haul in the parking lot, all right? That's not true. We actually have to fund it. Obviously, if it's cash, it's completely different. We can actually table fund if it's a cash deal. Meaning, as long as I have the buyer's money in my account already, and we close and I have all the seller documents on my side, I can actually fund the file right there and just fund it right there and send the wire to the seller, give the commission check, boom, boom, right there, within like 30 minutes. If it's cash. If it's financing, there's a funding process. So all those papers that get signed at closing, there's like a list that they give us in the closing instructions of those documents after they're signed that we have to send it to the lender. The lender reviews it and it gives us the okay to fund, like the green light, okay? Once they give us the okay to fund, then we go ahead and fund everything. Does that happen in 5 minutes? No, of course not. Why would that happen in 5 minutes? No, sometimes it takes an hour. If it's end of the month, it could take hours, okay? If you're closing after 2:30, 3 o'clock, you might not fund to the next day. What does that mean? It's not that the wires might not go out. You might fund and the wires will go out, but there's no guarantee that the seller's going to receive the money in their account that day. Because not every bank has like a wire cutoff time. So just because you send the wire doesn't mean it's going to hit that account that day or probably hit it the next day. We try to stay in the office and fund everything as much as we can, especially end of the month, mainly trying to get the seller proceeds out. Because most of the time, sellers won't give the keys unless they have the proceeds. Okay, so like literally the girls have stayed till 7, 8 o'clock at night, just kicking out wires, especially end of the month because it gets crazy. But at least to get the seller's wires out, because then the sellers can give the keys, especially if it's a Friday and the people have to move and all that stuff. Okay? If it's something that's really, if you know that your buyer has to leave that property that day because that's it, they got nowhere else to go, we need to make sure that we have a conversation a couple of days before closing and we let the lender know how important it is for us to close early. Because the earlier we close, the faster we can fund it, so the seller can at least get the wire confirmation and the money, and they can at least give the keys. Because no ticket, no laundry. A lot of sellers don't want to give the keys unless they have money. Some won't even take a wire confirmation, which I personally think is ridiculous. If there's a wire confirmation and it has all your information and it's correct, you're obviously going to get the money. You know what I mean? But then again, you can't control everything in life, and you can't control what people do or not. So keep that in mind, and make sure you tell your buyer that if you are doing a late closing, don't schedule movers. Don't show up at closing with a U-Haul truck. That's happened to me like 3 times. That they have the movers at the house, or they're actually at closing with the U-Haul truck downstairs. Like, I swear to God, that happened to me, and I actually did that closing. I was like, and they were closing on a Friday, like at 4 o'clock. I was like, ooh, that's gonna be a sticky situation. So we need to have all the documents in our possession, which also means if the seller is closing somewhere else, okay, because they have seller representation or an attorney, until I don't have the original documents in my possession, we usually don't fund. Why? Because I need the actual original warranty deed, especially if it's coming from another country. Then I definitely won't fund. Of course, we've made exceptions. If the seller will send me copies of everything, and I review everything, everything was signed correctly, and they FedEx it to me, whatever, then we'll usually fund with copies. We're not supposed to, but we do it. There's always exceptions for the rule. Okay? But keep that in mind, because once the seller has representation, we don't control the seller side. Because the person that's closing the seller is the one controlling it. Okay? Make sure that they understand wire cutoff times. If I don't have the buyer's proceeds in my account, I cannot fund. Okay, which is why at closing, we prefer wires when it comes to sending the cash to close. Because if we get a check or cashier's check, we actually have to wait for it to clear. Funny story, this happened to me on Friday. We funded, but it was he only had to come into closing with like $300, $308, something like that. Because because it was like a special whatever. And he gave us a personal check. So we funded it. We're like, oh, whatever, let's just fund it. The check bounced. Of course. The one time we funded the check, I mean, it was only $300, and the buyer yesterday wired us the $300. But I mean, you know what I mean? That's why usually we don't fund. But since it was only $300, we funded it. We're like, oh, let's just fund it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? We're out $300. But look, it bounced, and he actually did send the money. And the thing is, the lender has to see the money, the cash to close money coming out. We have to send them proof that it came out of that person's account. That's the other thing. Which I had another one. That guy left to Cuba. This was last week too. And he didn't send the money. So I literally had to FaceTime with his nephew so he could log into the bank, because then they were doing a transfer and they didn't know how to do it, and they wouldn't let him do the wire. That closed on Thursday. I still don't have the money. I funded the seller side already because we ended up doing a transfer and it takes a couple of days. I was able to fund the seller side and he got the keys, but I'm still waiting for the buyer's money. So you see little things happen here and there. Real estate is exciting, people. You're never going to get bored, okay? Any questions on the funding process?
Who's your favorite lender?
Who's my favorite lender? I don't have favorites. I have to stay neutral. That's like asking your mother who's her favorite kid. Can't say that. But there are some that I dislike, which I can't say that either. But there are some I dislike that every time I get a phone, I'm like, oh. I like, believe it or not, there's a lot of good lenders. Just so you know my background, I did mortgages for 17 years. I owned my own mortgage company and everything. I was a lender. I did the warehouse line, the whole shebang. I would never do that again. But, so I'm not a good person to ask. I'm really picky about lenders because I know what they're doing and I know how they do it. So if you ever have a problem with a lender, just call me. Because pretty much I know most of them, but there are some good lenders now. There was a time, like maybe like 10 years ago, oh my God, there were so many bad lenders. Lost, they didn't know what they were doing. If you get a lender from California or New York, good luck, because they don't understand Florida, so that's another mess. I had to get on the phone with an underwriter one time because of something, they didn't know the FHA guidelines. I'm like, no, that's wrong, whatever. So if you guys ever have an issue with a lender, just call me, I'm your girl. But there are a lot of good lenders. I mean, they're bad ones too.
You did say that the funds from the buyer need to come from the buyer's bank account.
Yes, unless it's a gift and the lender knows. If it's cash, it doesn't matter. If it's a lender, most lenders need to see the verification that that cash to close actually came out of the borrower's account. Because if not, it's considered a gift.
Tax purposes.
No, underwriting guideline purposes. So, if they are gonna do, usually if there's something like that going on, that they're gonna do a wire from the uncle's account, usually the lender knows because it's a gift, and I mean, they should tell them this, that it's a gift, you know what I mean, and they'll do a gift letter and the whole thing, but usually they'll know. But the funds do have to come out of a verified account that the lender has verified. I had a feeling.
I think they track like 2 months back. So if you're
Well, yes,
doing
when
it,
they verify.
just do it earlier.
Well, yeah, she's talking about the cash to close there. We're at the end. But yes, when they do look at your bank account, they do the last 2 months and they do the average balance. That's why they know when there's been a large deposit. Because let's say your average balance in April was 3,000 and then your average balance in May was 10,000. Obviously there was a large deposit there somewhere. Before, back in the day, conventional, they didn't have to give you bank statements. It was only with verification deposits, but that's how we could tell. When the 2 months average was off, that's what we could tell. But nowadays, they actually require 2 months bank statements on everything, and they track all deposits. So yes, if you have a client that has money under the bed, which believe it or not happens often, under the mattress, and they want to buy, and you're looking, you need to make sure that you structure that correctly. Work with a lender because, like, I have I have somebody that told them they're getting some money from, my cleaning lady's getting some money from her uncle, whatever, from a sale of a condo in her country or whatever. So she's getting money. So she wants to buy. So she's like, what do? I'm like, you haven't started looking, right? She's like, no. I'm like, well, stick in that money, but keep in mind, you're sticking X amount of money. It also red flags the IRS. So keep that in mind. If they can do it little by little, it's better. But if you know that your time, okay, we're gonna start looking now, so you're probably not gonna get under contract for like another month and a half, whatever, then have them just stick the deposit in there, and then you have to wait the 2 months, so the average kind of like fixes itself, basically. So any large deposits, and you don't know how many times I've heard lenders that has to go back to underwriting and delays the closing because the buyer made some crazy large deposit and he thought it was okay because it was, from his uncle or whatever. Sometimes they can fix it and they can say it's a gift, but it depends what program they're doing, because maybe it doesn't allow gifted funds, or maybe it's only a certain amount of gifted funds, so the communication part with the lender is important, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong during the process. So the more communication that there is, the worse is dealing with a lender that doesn't tell you what's going on. I hate that, it drives me crazy, because I want to know what's going on. I'm a control freak, so I like to kind of like be in the know, just so I know, so I can prepare. The worst is a surprise. Nobody likes surprises. Good news or bad news, you just head on, I know it sucks to get bad news sometimes, but it's better to face a problem at once and have it linger. And I noticed that there's some people that I know that just they avoid the problem, and then it's worse, because then you're hiding from people and nobody likes that. So, okay. Things to remember, guys. Number 1, prepare your buyer for closing. I say this all the time because this is where the part where everybody goes, crazy. I call it closing stress. That's my new thing. I don't have a hashtag. Closing stress. It's real, people. Okay? The best days to close, believe it or not, are Tuesdays through Thursdays. Why? Because everybody wants to move during the weekend. So you don't want to get stuck Friday at 5 o'clock doing a closing, and then they can't move because it doesn't fund and blah, blah, blah. Can we control this? Not all the time. Because then all of a sudden the lender's like, oh, we're ready to close on Friday, and it's Friday, and go, so we really can control this. But if you have a say, Tuesdays through Thursdays are the best time to close. It's like a lot calmer. You know it's going to fund. You know they're going to get the keys and everything. If you're going to have a late closing, keep in mind the closing and the funding deadlines of the wires. So if you know you're closing at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, know that it might not fund the next day, and prepare your client for this, and let them know, you might not get the keys today because we're closing late, so it's not going to happen until tomorrow, so you might not get the keys until the next day. Let them know this, because they get to closing with this illusion that they're going to get the keys, and right after the closing, they're going to go to the house and take pictures and the whole 9 yards. Not if you're closing at 5 or 7 o'clock at night. That's not going to happen. Forget the photo shoot. Cancel it to the following day. Okay? We need the original condo approval. So if there is an HOA and the buyer's getting approved, we need the original. Why? So a lot of the times they're notarized. Sometimes they have original signatures, and we record it with the deed. So it gets to recording, and then we give it back to them after. Everyone that's on the deed must be on the HOA approval. I know I said that, I'm just repeating it, because these are things that I see happen a lot. Okay? Always verify with the lender or the title company who has to be present at closing. Because this is what happens. I apply for a mortgage, I get approved, I'm married. But I'm the only one on the mortgage. I'm the only one applying for the loan. So I get to closing without my husband. Guess what? My husband has to sign. Not every time. I know if it's an investment property, the spouse doesn't have to sign. There's certain circumstances. So we don't find out who has to come to sign until we actually get the package. And we're like, oh, who's this person on the mortgage? You know what I mean? But usually if it's conventional or FHA, and you're buying as a primary residence, and it's going to be their homestead, and they're married, the spouse has to sign the mortgage and a couple of other documents. So keep that in mind when you're doing the closing, because yeah, maybe the wife is available today and then the husband is in New York on business. Then I have to get signatures from the husband. So these are things that you need to be aware of when it comes to closing and financing. Make sure that you ask the lender, hey, does the husband or the wife have to be at closing? They don't always have to be at closing, but again, if it's FHA, for sure, and if it's conventional, it depends if it's a second home investment, primary, but the best one to check with is the lender. You don't know how many times people have showed up to closing without the spouse, and the spouse has to sign, and the spouse is not even here. Okay? Everyone that's on title, if you're dealing with a seller, everyone that's on title has to sign. Okay? So if there's 15 people on title, which this happened a few weeks ago, 50 people on title, all 15 people have to sign. Okay? So if you're representing the seller and you gotta go to closing and there's 3 people on title, they all have to sign because they have to sign over the deed. Now, we can do power of attorneys, but a lot of underwriters don't like power of attorney, so it depends who the underwriter is. So it's always best to know ahead of time. The communication is important. If you know that there's multiple people on title and multiple people, and everyone cannot be there for the closing, we need to know so we can make arrangements, either documentation, POAs, get it approved, whatever, so we can tackle the problem in the beginning, not at closing when we're supposed to be closing, because then it could delay your closing. Okay? If it's a corporation, there are members on the corporation. We usually ask for the operating agreement, which lets us know who can sign and who can't. If they don't have an operating agreement, then we can do an affidavit. But we always ask for corporation papers when we see that it's a seller on title. And keep in mind, if it's a corporation and it's a seller, the proceeds of that sale have to go into the corporation's bank account, not the person's, okay? So, and if there's more than one person on title, let's say like 3 or 4 people on title and it's a seller, I either need a bank account with everyone on there or individual bank accounts. I can't just send, if me, you, and you are under contract, let's say, and we're selling a property. They're not gonna only send me the money. Oh, don't worry, I got them. I'll give them their portion. What if me and you are in a fight? I'm like, screw him, I ain't getting him. Me and her are gonna split it. You know what I'm saying? So kind of like that's why it's done like that. And we have to do it like that because of escrow, whatever laws. So if it's 3 people on title and they're selling, the proceeds, I either have to have an account with 2 of them on there, let's say husband and wife, sometimes they share accounts. That's okay, and then let's say the daughter. Then I would just need 2 bank accounts. And then it gets split evenly unless it specifies otherwise. Because sometimes there are like percentages. Corporations have percentages. Now, corporation, it has to go into a corporate bank account. I can't send it into an individual's bank account. I don't care if you're the only person in the corporation, I can't send it to you. I have to send it to a bank account of the corporation. So keep that in mind because not everybody has a bank account for the corporation. Now, a way around that is if they have an attorney, we can send it to an attorney account if they have an attorney, and then the attorney can disperse to them. That's like a little loophole there. So it happened to me once. There was a corporation. The people were, I don't know, in another country, and they didn't have a bank account. And it already closed. And I had no bank account. And imagine, I have to give the check. If I give a check, I have to give it in the corporation name. But if you don't have a bank account, where are you going to deposit it? So the guy, he had an attorney, friend, whatever, and I was able to send him the money, and he was able to disperse for him. So that was like a little loophole I learned last year. Okay, so that's what. So anybody have any questions on that, on the disbursement? No? Okay, I think that's it. Okay. Now, I'm a control freak. So sometimes you don't have control because you're representing the seller, okay? And I've had agents come to me because, yeah, they like to close with me, and I'll do the seller side, but the buyer still, but the actual title company that's doing the closing is another title company. So whoever is insuring the title is the one that actually does the closing, the disbursement, all that. If I'm representing just the seller, the only thing I'm doing is preparing seller docs, doing the actual closing, but the disbursement, the updates with the lender, it's all them, the other title company. So some people don't like that because it's crazy and they have to depend on somebody else, and it's happened that then the lender, they don't know because the lender's talking. At the end of the day, the title company has to maintain neutral. But let's be serious. Like if we have a working relationship and I close all your deals, I'm obviously going to be a little bit biased, you know what I mean? Because it's a relationship business. So when you're in somebody else's house, you might not get the same treatment. So a lot of agents had come to us and be like, oh, how can we take control of the transaction without costing the seller more money? So we did some numbers and we came up with the solution. Any contract, if you have the seller, any contract it has to be under 300,000 for the numbers to actually make sense. Any contract under 300,000, if you put that the seller pays title, there's some fees that they don't pay just because of marking that box. There's certain fees that they don't pay. I believe it's title research that they don't have to pay. So those fees get waived, and we waive our closing fee completely, which then kind of, it costs the same amount as the title insurance. So basically, we're paying for the title insurance by waiving all those fees. So it doesn't look like that on the CD, but basically because we're waiving the closing fee and we're waiving, there's certain fees that get waived on the seller side, it comes out to the same amount as if the buyer were paying the title. Under 300. Once we go up above 300, the title insurance, I mean, we can still waive the fees, but then it's going to cost the seller maybe $200 more. If they would have closed in the buyer's title company, they wouldn't have to pay those $200. You know what I mean? So it's always under 300. Because anything 500,000, $1 million, the title insurance is too much. It doesn't make sense. You know, and it's not fair for the seller to have to incur those costs. You know, that's one of the things that a lot of my realtors do, kind of just to stay in control of the transaction. Just because it's been a nightmare sometimes when they end up in somebody else's title company, and then you don't even know what's going on with the lender because the lender doesn't talk to us. So if that buyer has financing, the one that knows what's going on is the title company. And if the title company works with that realtor, they're going to cover for that realtor. Even though they're not supposed to, they're supposed to be neutral. But realistically speaking, we're human. We're always going to protect our people, more than the other person, because I kind of strategize sometimes with my realtors. When something's wrong, oh, this is happening, what can we do? Okay, let's try doing this. I try to think outside the box to find a solution to the problem. Obviously, I'm doing that because I have a working relationship with this person. You can't do that when you're in somebody else's title company. And you don't know what's going on with the lender because they're not going to tell you anything, and they can't. The lenders can only talk to the buyer's realtor or the title company because they cannot share what's going on with the loan with the listing agent. Because it's supposed to be confidential, blah, blah, blah. And this is my information. If you're not following me on Instagram or Facebook, please follow me. My page is super fun sometimes when I'm not that busy and I actually post. But does anybody have any questions? Because I'm such a great teacher, right? You guys don't laugh at any of my jokes. Okay? Yes, the actual paper. The actual HOA approval, you have to actually go pick it up. A lot of times you have to go pick it up at the HOA or the management company. And bring it to your office? You bring it at closing. You scan it, you send us a copy so we know we have it, whatever, and then you just bring the original to closing. Also, when you're closing, you need to have valid IDs. I know it sounds crazy or stupid, but I swear, valid, and it can't be expired. So if you have an expired passport, you can't use it. It has to be, or your license is expired, the client has to have a picture ID that is valid, not expired. Okay?
Do you always have closings in your office, or you do?
We have closings everywhere. We have them in our office. I've even done a closing on a bus bench.
But you close
The what?
By mail?
By mail also. But we send out an info sheet in the beginning of when we first get the file, we send out an info sheet. And in that info sheet, it asks you if it's a mail away. Here's the thing, sometimes you guys don't know it's a mail away. You know, it's not even sometimes the realtor's fault, because sometimes you guys don't know, and then a week before closing, they say, hey, surprise, it's a mail away. You know, if I know ahead of time, if your buyer, your seller is leaving, or one of them is leaving, if you tell me ahead of time, I can try to prepare documents to have them already done, so they can sign them before they leave. Or prepare a power of attorney, let's say they're leaving, I can prepare a power of attorney, they can sign it, I can get it approved by the lender if there's a lender, and by my underwriter, and then that's it. The seller, the most important thing the seller has to sign is the warranty deed. So if your seller is leaving out of town, you let us know, we can prepare the deed, they have it signed, notarized, and we have it there in the file until it closes. Communication is super important. If you tell us things with time, we can make it happen. Sometimes even when you don't tell us with time, we make it happen. We're very big on finding solutions and making sure everything is done and everything closes. That's one thing about us, we'll go the extra mile just to get it done. So just if it's gonna be a mail away, just let me know, and then we can strategize how to do that and so forth and so on.
You said earnest money has to be a cashier's check?
Okay, escrow
Say it's
deposit.
5,000, say it's 5,000. Can they write a personal check?
For what, for escrow deposit?
Yes.
No, for escrow deposit, it could be a check, it could be a personal check no matter what.
Okay.
It's for the closing. When it's the cash to close and you need to send money for closing, we always ask for a wire. Just because once they wire it, it's usually, most of the time, it's instant. Unless they wire after a certain time, and then depending on the bank, it might have a cutoff time. Like I said, we did accept a personal check for closing the other day, but it was $300 and it bounced, whatever.
So say I do a contract and I have a check. Can you guys come to where I'm at to pick it up?
It depends where I'm at.
So you don't have
Cause I'm at, well, you could drop it off at any of our locations. You can do that, drop it off at any of our locations. Or you can call me or Amante, and if we're in the area, by any chance, we could stop and pick it up. I do pick up escrow checks sometimes. So if I'm in the area, believe it or not, I'm in this area quite a bit. More brick or gables, but still, it's like right there. But yeah, if you ever have a check and you wanna go to the office, give us a call, maybe one of us in the area, and I could just pick it up here, or meet up with you, or whatever. If not, they can drop it off at any location. Just if they're gonna drop it off in a certain location, just let me know so I can give the girl a heads up, because sometimes people get there with checks, they don't put the address on the check, they don't know, and then they start asking the buyer, what contract is this? And the buyer starts freaking out, what do you mean you don't have my contract? You know what I mean? So if I know that you're gonna go drop it off, let's say in Kendall, I'll call the girl and be like, hey, they're gonna drop off an escrow check, here's the contract, you can do the letter, it's gonna go to this office. And I kind of warn her ahead of time, you know? So then when she gets there, they're like, what do you mean you don't have my contract? Then the buyer freaks out, they get scared, especially first-time home buyers. Because you know, they're like, what do you mean they don't have my contract? They don't know who I am? This is shady, you know? I swear to God, it just happened. Like all these crazy things I'm saying, I know they're funny because I'm super hilarious, but these are things that actually have happened. These are real life stories. So yeah, I'm gonna write a book one day. I'll tell you guys when I do it. I'll probably be retired, but it's gonna be a good book.
Yeah, like the ID, I had a guy who was buying a property and he was on the weekend in California and lost his ID. So when he came to the closing, he's like, oh, I don't have any ID on me. I lost it in Cali over the weekend. It's like,
Well, that's a problem.
that's a problem.
That's a huge problem. But he didn't have an ID. Like, yeah, but maybe the lender should have gotten a copy of the ID in the beginning. Maybe the lender could have sent us a copy, or whoever a copy.
Yeah, what if it was a cash deal? Do they still need an ID?
You always need ID. You have to notarize papers. How do I know I'm notarizing you? You could say you're you, but maybe you're not you.
While closing, you keep in touch with the realtors, or you actually?
We usually keep in touch with the realtors. If they're realtors involved, the whole point of having a realtor is they're kind of like shielding the buyer. It also depends. Some realtors don't want us to contact their buyers at all. Then we have realtors that they don't care. They're like, listen, just call me when it's closing, and here's my buyer's number, and whatever. So it depends. If there are times, believe it or not, when we ask for the info sheet, the buyers and sellers are giving us information. Their numbers and stuff like that, emails and stuff like that. I've had realtors disappear. like totally disappear. Like we have not even heard of the realtor. So we've had to deal directly with the seller. Especially if they have to close out permits or liens and stuff like that, then we deal directly with the seller sometimes because it's just easier. Sometimes the realtor's like, look, I don't know, I don't understand, just call the seller. As long as they give us the permission, we can go ahead and contact them. The problem with that is we don't like to step on people's toes because everybody works completely different. I have one realtor that she doesn't want nobody copied on the emails, only her, and do separate emails for her and the listing agent. But with the ones for the listing agent, she can be on those, but the ones directly to her buyer can only be her. So, you know what I mean? So obviously I have her with the same processor all the time so she knows the rules and the regulations. Then some realtors, they look, just deal directly with my client, I don't care. Then some, don't contact my client at all. But then what happens is at closing, if you do that, then what happens, the closer starts to schedule the closing directly with the client. And then the realtor's like, oh, I wanted to be at the closing, I can't go at that time. I'm like, oh, but we already scheduled it with the buyer. So then, oh, you should have scheduled it with me. Yeah, but you told me to deal everything with your buyer. So you see how that can get, So we copy the realtor on every email. So if you want us to add your buyer, I can add your buyer. But then know that the listing agent is probably going to be on that email as well. So they'll have your buyer's information if they didn't notice. Some people don't even notice. So just keep that in mind because we like to have everybody to be on the same page. Because we like to give updates weekly. As you get closer to closing, you see the emails like increase. Usually you get in the beginning it's slow. Hey, title's ordered. Hey, title came in. Hey, whatever. Then as it starts moving, oh, lien search came in. Okay, this is happening. Blah, blah, and then it starts to the back and forth more. If there's an issue on title or lien, we're dealing directly with the listing agent. You know what I mean? So let's say I have to close a permit or whatever, they have to do something in the city. We're dealing directly with the listing agent because it's the seller's responsibility to close it out and do all that. So, we give you updates of what's going on, but there's a lot of communication with the listing agent or the seller as to, okay, what about the permit? Hey, don't forget the permit, back and forth. Because technically you can close with open permits. Unless you put special verbiage on the contract, you can close with open permits and city. Because remember, the lender usually only sees title. Title's everything that gets recorded in the courts. Lien search is city. They don't look at lien search. We can close with open permits. The client has to sign a hold harmless, just taking the liability off everyone. But we don't like to do it. We always try to push for them to close it, because it might not be a problem now on title, but maybe in 3 years it can become a problem later on title. And once it gets on title and you own the property, that's your problem. It's no longer, the title insurance is not going to cover it. You can't contact the seller, none of that. So that's why we push, you know what I mean? And then sometimes it's not a big deal. Like if you're iffy, oh, I don't know if I should close with this open or not, call me and I'll look it over. And if it's an open permit for a fence from 1995, I'll be like, close it like that. That's probably from Hurricane Andrew. It's not a big deal. As long as the fence is not on the floor, they'll go ahead and close the permit. It's like certain things are not. Now there's certain violations that, because of the structure of the house or something, that can get a little sticky. So then that's when you have to determine, like, I'll be like, okay, well, it's on the structure, what are they gonna do? Did they build an extra room, an extra garage? Like, did the city not know? Because what happens is, the city might not know about it now, right? Which is not, if they don't know about it now, it's not gonna come up on my lien search. Because they don't know about it. Then a year later, guess what, an inspector passed by, they told me I had to knock down my beautiful patio outside because I'm not up to code or whatever. You should have told me, but it wasn't on the lien search. So there's no way for me to tell you because the city didn't know about it. And it's weird how miraculously after closing, inspectors show up. So you have to be careful with that too. Again, if you're unsure, give us a call and we'll talk about it, we'll look it over, you know what I mean, before you go to your client. Okay, I'm a big believer that when you're gonna go with certain news, you go with options and solutions, not just a problem. You don't tell them, hey, by the way, there's a structure on there with no permits, but don't worry, we're figuring it out. You'll drive them crazy. They're gonna call you every day, 5 times a day. What do you mean on structure, should I get out, cancel the contract, you know what I mean? Or they see something, oh, no permit for a fence, and they freak out because they think it's a big deal, and it's not a big deal, you know what I mean? So when there's something that you're unsure of what to do, you always give me a call or give me a call, let's talk about it, let's figure out like how to approach the client. Because remember, at the end of the day, do not make decisions for your clients. It's not your decision. Your decision is to guide them. Okay? At the end of the day, this is what's going on. You have option A, option B, and option C. What do you want to do? And it all falls on them. They're the ones buying the house. They're the ones, you know, the decision has to be theirs. You make a decision for them and something goes wrong, it's your fault. Hmm?
In terms of working with international buyers, anything you need to know, like when they wiring money from their
Yes.
specific
Okay.
address?
International buyers, if they are going to wire funds from a bank from another country, it's good to give them like an amount ahead of time. Because sometimes the wires can take a few days to hit the United States. So if they're doing financing, let's say because some foreign nationals do financing, let's say they do financing, and we don't have the cash to close because it's not closing yet, or whatever, then we kind of figure out how much it is, and then we tag a little bit extra on top, have them wire it so the money's already in our account, and then whatever the difference is, we send it back to them. But then that way it doesn't hold up the funding. Very important, if they are not going to be here for closing and they are in another country, we need to know that right away. Because if it's Venezuela, there's no embassy. So there's no way to do a closing right now in Venezuela. Some countries, like I know Italy, they have certain notaries that we can accept. Because things have to be notarized. So if they're in another country, we need to know ahead of time to figure out what we're going to do. If it's Venezuela, forget it, they're going to have to fly over. Because there's like no embassy there, there's nobody to notarize, you know, so, but yes, if you are dealing with foreigners, make sure you tell your title company ahead of time, which is on the info sheet as well. But just, you know, have that conversation because we have to figure out, okay, how are we gonna close it? Can they go to the embassy? I've had people that have closed in other countries that have had to like travel 2 hours, you know, by car to get to an embassy, because they gotta get it notarized there. So it's always best to do things ahead of time. Power of attorney still has to get notarized. They still have to go to the embassy. And everybody says power of attorney, I'm like, yes, but it has to get notarized. Usually what we do when we do send paperwork over there for them to notarize, we always add a power of attorney. Because they're already there getting it notarized. So we ask them, hey, can we have a power of attorney just in case to the realtor, to somebody that's here, just in case something else has to be signed. Let's say something came in the package of the lender that they have to sign and they're not here. Instead of sending everything over, we already have a POA, so we have somebody to sign for them. We don't have to like, you know. Good. And that's all I got, folks. I think we have somebody else coming up, a developer or something, right? Oh, thank you. All right, well, I'm done. Thank you. Oh, stop. You're welcome.
I hope you guys understand the driving point when she was mentioning that it's a process, okay? It's a process in the case of things happen and a lot of people are involved getting this closing done, okay? So when you call me as a closing manager and it sounds like, oh, I have not gotten the wire instructions to close this tomorrow, trust us, we got it. Don't stress. And the whole idea that what she was mentioning is like, give the expectations to your clients. Let them know, like, in a perfect world, you're gonna close, you're gonna have everything in 3 days. In Miami, most likely,
You know, it's not
90%
only
of
Miami.
not only
Everybody says
Miami, but
but I have a witness. It's not only in Miami. Ocala's pretty bad, let me tell you.
Florida. Just because we have so many red tape, right? It does have this kind of like last minute, but at the end of the day, the CD will have the closing date. You're gonna get a review at the end of the day with the HUD, and you're going to tell your client we are both agreed, and then the wire instructions get sent. The wire instructions get transferred within the same day, unless it's a cashier's check, and then that will take a little longer.
No.
But it doesn't even matter because we pay you guys as long as the HUD is signed. So as long as I have a HUD that's signed, you guys get commission. So that's another positive on that end.
If I'm choosing New World, I'm working with Jennifer or one of the associates?
Yeah, it's me and Amante, either or.
Okay.
Yes,
And remember, it's a team. Again, it's another thing, it's a team. So you're working with them, and then there's a title coordinator, right?
Right.
And then there's a closing coordinator. And remember, they're also working with underwriters. Not that you'll be communicating with them, but again, it's a
team effort.
machine.
It
It's
is
a team effort,
machine.
okay? And one of the best parts about New World, if you guys, I'm not sure if you pitched it, is the app.
Oh,
So
no, I didn't mention it.
Yeah. So the app is pretty much what we have in our back office for our clients, the user interface, that shows you step by step with all of the procedures and everything that's actually pending. And on top of that, if there's any files that you need to get uploaded, you can just upload it from there. So one of the things that they do is when they open a file, they send a link out to you guys as an agent and to the clients. This again allows them to be more transparent and aware of where they are. Okay?
Yeah, but you know what's funny? Hardly any of them download it. Like
Oh,
not the realtors. I mean, like buyers and sellers. I've noticed that none of them really. You still get the emails, even though you have the app. But sometimes, just so you know, the app says its stuff is manually inputted. Sometimes you're gonna get. I don't know, you get notifications, boom, boom, boom. You get like 3 or 4 in one day. You know. But you get emails. So the emails are always more accurate, obviously, because they're more like real time. The app is just so you can have it handy and you know what's going on. And you can actually access some of the documents from the app and email it from the app to whoever you want.
Okay. And that's it. Thank you so much. All right. And then we have a second presenter today. We have a special day today. We have